"You're not leaving with my name, my house, or my future," Ethan Caldwell said, his voice calm enough to be terrifying. And in that instant, Audrey Sinclair realized that the mansion everyone envied had never really been a home. Rain hammered the sprawling estate like handfuls of gravel thrown from the sky. The iron gates rattled in the wind. The perfectly trimmed hedges bent beneath the storm. From a distance, the Caldwell residence still looked like the kind of place featured on magazine covers, a place where successful people lived flawless lives. But appearances had always been Ethan's favorite investment. Audrey stood beneath the glow of the front entrance lights, one hand resting on her 8-month pregnant belly, the other gripping the handle of a suitcase she never expected to pack. Her heart wasn't breaking because of the storm. It wasn't even breaking because of the man standing in the doorway. It was breaking because 3 hours earlier she had still believed her marriage could be saved. What she didn't know was that someone else had been watching the house long before the storm arrived. Someone who wasn't supposed to be there. Someone who had already seen enough to change everything. A flash of lightning illuminated the circular driveway. For a split second, the entire property turned white. Then darkness returned. Audrey looked past Ethan's shoulder. The grand foyer behind him glowed with warmth, crystal chandeliers reflecting across polished marble floors. It looked like a life she no longer belonged to. "Please," she said quietly. "Let's talk tomorrow." Ethan laughed once. Not loudly. Not cruelly. Just the laugh of a man who had already made his decision. Tomorrow won't change anything. The front door began to close. Audrey stared at him. 5 years. 5 years of anniversaries, business dinners, charity galas, and promises whispered during sleepless nights. 5 years reduced to a single closing door. Then it happened. The heavy oak door shut completely. The lock clicked. One small sound, yet it echoed louder than the thunder overhead. Audrey stood frozen. Rain soaked through her coat. Water slid down her cheeks and mixed with tears she refused to acknowledge. Inside the house, not a single curtain moved. No servant appeared. No friend called. No neighbor noticed. Or maybe they noticed and chose silence. Wolf had a way of making people look away. Another flash of lightning crossed the sky. This time Audrey noticed something she had missed before. At the far end of the road, beyond the security gates, a black SUV sat parked beneath a row of swaying oak trees. Its headlights were off. Its engine appeared silent. She narrowed her eyes. Was someone inside? The vehicle hadn't been there earlier. Or had it? Before she could decide, another wave of rain swept across the property, blurring her view. The SUV disappeared behind a curtain of water. A strange feeling settled into her chest. Not fear. Not exactly. More like the sensation of standing at the edge of a puzzle without knowing which piece mattered most. Audrey looked down at her stomach. The baby shifted gently, a reminder that she wasn't alone. "It's okay," she whispered, though she wasn't sure whether she was comforting her child or herself. Somewhere beyond the gates, hidden behind rain and darkness, a pair of eyes remained fixed on the mansion. The person inside the SUV had witnessed the entire scene. But the real mystery wasn't why they had been watching. The real mystery was this. Why hadn't they stepped in? The windshield wipers moved back and forth in a steady rhythm, pushing sheets of rain aside for only a second before the storm swallowed the view again. Inside the black SUV, Benjamin Sinclair sat motionless. His hands rested on the steering wheel. His jaw remained tight. His eyes never left his daughter. Most fathers would have rushed through the gates. Most fathers would have stormed to the front door demanding answers. Benjamin didn't either, because 27 years on the federal bench had taught him one lesson above all others. The truth revealed too early often escaped justice. The truth documented carefully never did. Audrey pulled her suitcase toward the road, struggling against the wind. Benjamin felt something twist deep inside his chest. He remembered teaching her how to ride a bicycle on a quiet suburban street. He remembered the day she graduated from law school. He remembered walking her down the aisle while Ethan Caldwell promised to honor and protect her for the rest of their lives. Promises, Benjamin thought bitterly, were the cheapest currency in America. His phone vibrated. The screen displayed a single name. Daniel Mercer. Benjamin answered immediately. "You were right," he said quietly. On the other end of the line, Daniel hesitated. "About what?" "About Ethan." Silence. Then a long exhale. Daniel had been Benjamin's private investigator for nearly a decade. What happened? Benjamin watched Audrey disappear beneath the glow of a street lamp. Everything. Another flash of lightning illuminated the road. Daniel's voice lowered. Do you want me to start tonight? Benjamin glanced at the mansion one final time. Warm lights glowed behind enormous windows. The house looked peaceful, respectable, successful. No, Benjamin replied. I want you to finish tonight. That answer seemed to surprise even Daniel. Finish what? Benjamin stared at the front door that had just closed on his daughter. Whatever Ethan Caldwell has been hiding. Meanwhile, Audrey continued walking. The nearest gas station was almost a mile away. Under normal circumstances, the distance would have been nothing. Tonight it felt endless. Rain soaked through her shoes. Her coat grew heavier with every step. Yet she refused to call anyone. Not her friends. Not her former co-workers. Not even her father. Especially not her father. The last conversation they had shared echoed in her mind. 6 months earlier, Benjamin had invited her to dinner. Halfway through the meal, he had set down his fork and asked a question that made no sense at the time. Has Ethan changed? Audrey had laughed then. She remembered doing it. A nervous laugh. A defensive laugh. People change, Dad. Benjamin had looked unconvinced. Good people become better. Bad people become more comfortable. She had left the restaurant angry. Now those words followed her through the storm. A pair of headlights approached from behind. Audrey stepped farther onto the shoulder. The vehicle slowed. For one brief second, she feared it might be someone connected to Ethan. The passenger window lowered. A middle-aged woman leaned toward the opening. Honey, are you okay? Audrey forced a smile. I will be. The woman studied her carefully. Her eyes drifted to Audrey's pregnant belly, then to the suitcase, then back to her face. She seemed to understand far more than Audrey had actually said. There is a 24-hour diner 2 blocks ahead, the woman offered gently. Warm coffee. Friendly people. Audrey nodded. Thank you. The car pulled away. Yet the encounter left her unsettled. Not because of what the woman had said. Because of what she had not said. No questions. No judgment. Just recognition. As if she had seen this kind of heartbreak before. Far behind her, Benjamin started the SUV engine. The investigation had already begun. And neither Audrey nor Ethan had any idea how much was about to be uncovered. At 2:17 in the morning, Audrey Sinclair sat alone in a corner booth of the 24-hour diner, staring at a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. The neon sign outside buzzed softly against the storm. A waitress refilled her mug twice without asking questions. Audrey appreciated that. Questions required answers. And she was no longer sure she understood her own life well enough to answer any of them. Across town, Ethan Caldwell stood in his home office overlooking the city skyline. The storm painted streaks of water across the floor-to-ceiling windows. Normally, the view calmed him. Tonight, it felt strangely distant. His phone vibrated on the desk. A message appeared from Vanessa Brooks. Is it done? Ethan stared at the screen. 5 simple words. Yet something about them unsettled him. He typed a response. Then erased it. Typed another. Erased that too. Finally, he locked the phone and tossed it aside. He told himself the feeling was guilt. But deep down he knew it was something else. Unease. The kind that appears when a decision cannot be undone. Meanwhile, nearly 30 miles away, Benjamin Sinclair sat inside his private office. The room was lined with books accumulated over 4 decades. Law journals, case files, history, truth. His laptop illuminated the otherwise dark space. An encrypted email appeared on the screen. Sender, Daniel Mercer. Subject, Caldwell Holdings. Benjamin opened the attachment. What he saw made him lean forward immediately. The file contained financial transfers spanning 18 months. Large amounts of money moved through companies that appeared unrelated at first glance. But Benjamin had spent too many years examining evidence to miss patterns. 3 shell corporations, 2 offshore accounts, 1 recurring recipient. Vanessa Brooks. Benjamin read every page carefully. Then he noticed something that made his expression change completely. One transaction had occurred only 3 days earlier. The amount exceeded $2 million. There was no legitimate business reason for it. None. He reached for the phone. Daniel, I figured you would call. How certain are you? Daniel answered without hesitation. Certain enough that I would testify under oath. Benjamin looked at the rain striking his office window. Keep digging. There is more. Daniel laughed softly. There is always more. Back at the diner, Audrey's phone remained silent on the table. No calls. No messages. No apology. She should have been angry. Instead, she felt tired. Deeply tired. The kind of exhaustion that comes from carrying hope long after hope has stopped carrying you. Her eyes drifted toward the television mounted above the counter. A local business report was playing. The anchor smiled confidently as images flashed across the screen. Then Audrey nearly dropped her coffee mug. Ethan appeared on television. The footage was from a charity event held 2 weeks earlier. He stood beside Vanessa Brooks, both smiling for photographers. Audrey remembered that evening clearly. Ethan had told her he was attending a private investor meeting. Nothing more. Yet there he was, standing shoulder to shoulder with the woman he claimed was merely a marketing executive. Audrey felt something click into place. Not heartbreak, not shock, recognition. The scattered pieces of a puzzle beginning to form a picture. Across the city, Ethan finally picked up his phone and opened Vanessa's message again. This time a second text appeared beneath it. A new message sent only seconds earlier. He read it once. Then again. The color drained from his face. Someone is investigating us. Vanessa Brooks did not panic easily. That was one of the reasons she had risen so quickly through Caldwell Holdings. She understood perception better than most people understood reality. By 7 o'clock the next morning, she sat inside a private corner booth at an upscale cafe overlooking the river, dressed flawlessly, sipping espresso as if nothing in the world could possibly threaten her. Yet her fingers tapped the side of the cup every few seconds, a habit she only displayed when she was worried. Ethan arrived 12 minutes late. He looked exhausted. The dark circles beneath his eyes told a story he would never admit out loud. Vanessa noticed immediately. "You look terrible," she said. Ethan slid into the seat across from her. "Someone is investigating us." Vanessa set down her cup. "Who?" "I do not know." "Then how do you know it is real?" Ethan pulled out his phone and showed her the message. Vanessa read it silently. Her expression remained calm, but something sharp flickered behind her eyes. "Where did this come from?" "One of our financial advisors." "Can he be trusted?" Ethan hesitated. "Until yesterday, I thought so." Outside the cafe window, sunlight reflected off the river. The storm had passed, leaving the city looking clean and innocent. Neither of them noticed the irony. Across town, Audrey woke inside a small room above the diner. The owner, a widowed woman named Martha Green, had insisted she stay the night. Audrey had tried to refuse. Martha had ignored her completely. Now Audrey sat on the edge of the bed staring at her reflection in the mirror. She barely recognized herself. Not because she looked different, because she felt different. Something had shifted during the night. For months, she had blamed herself for everything. For Ethan's distance, for his coldness, for the silence that had slowly consumed their marriage. Now, for the first time, she wondered if she had been asking the wrong questions all along. Her phone buzzed. Audrey glanced at the screen. The message came from an unknown number. Her pulse quickened. She opened it immediately. There were only 7 words. "Do not trust anything Ethan tells you." No name. No explanation. Nothing else. Audrey stared at the message. Then another notification appeared. This time it was an email. Attached was a photograph. Audrey opened it. The image showed Ethan and Vanessa entering a luxury resort outside Aspen nearly 9 months earlier. The timestamp was impossible to ignore. Ethan had told her he was attending a corporate retreat in Chicago that weekend. Audrey felt her stomach tighten. Not because of jealousy. Because of certainty. Every lie suddenly connected to another lie. Every excuse now sounded rehearsed. Every missing piece finally had a place. Meanwhile, Benjamin sat inside his office reviewing another report from Daniel Mercer. This file was thicker than the first. Much thicker. Daniel's voice came through the speakerphone. "You were right to be concerned." Benjamin continued reading. "Tell me something I do not already know." "Vanessa is not interested in Ethan." Benjamin looked up. "Explain." "She has been connected to 3 executives over the past 8 years. Every relationship followed the same pattern. Rapid trust. Financial access. Then sudden exits once assets changed hands." Benjamin removed his glasses slowly. "You are saying Ethan was targeted." "I am saying Ethan may not be the mastermind he thinks he is." Benjamin ended the call a few minutes later and stared at the growing stack of evidence. Outside his office window, the city moved normally. People rushed to work. Traffic lights changed. Life continued. Yet somewhere beneath that ordinary surface, a carefully constructed illusion was beginning to crack. And for the first time, the person in the greatest danger of losing everything might not be Audrey at all. Audrey spent the next 2 days in Martha Green's small apartment above the diner, telling herself she was only staying long enough to figure out her next step. The truth was far less comforting. She had spent so many years building her life around Ethan Caldwell that she no longer knew where the edges of her own life began. On the third morning, she woke to the smell of coffee and fresh biscuits drifting through the floorboards. For a brief moment, she forgot everything. Then her phone buzzed. The memory returned instantly. Audrey reached for the device on the nightstand. Another anonymous email had arrived overnight. Her pulse quickened as she opened it. Unlike the previous messages, this one contained a single document. No explanation, no signature, just a scanned copy of a legal filing. Audrey frowned. The document appeared to be part of a trust agreement. Several pages were blacked out, but one sentence remained visible. She read it once, then again. Her breathing slowed. Any biological child born to Audrey Sinclair Caldwell shall become the primary beneficiary. Audrey stared at the screen. Beneficiary of what? The document did not say. The redacted sections concealed almost everything important. Yet one fact stood out clearly. Someone had gone to considerable effort to hide this information. Downstairs, customers filled the diner as the breakfast rush began. Martha carried plates between tables while pretending not to watch Audrey through the service window. She knew something was wrong. She simply respected boundaries enough not to ask. Across the city, Benjamin Sinclair sat inside Daniel Mercer's office reviewing another stack of records. The private investigator looked more energized than tired. That alone concerned Benjamin. "You found something," Benjamin said. Daniel nodded immediately. "I found the reason your daughter is in danger." Benjamin's expression hardened. Daniel slid a folder across the desk. 3 years ago, Ethan's grandfather revised the Caldwell family trust. Benjamin opened the file. Why? Because he did not trust the rest of the family. Daniel leaned back in his chair. The old man believed most of them cared more about money than legacy. Benjamin continued reading. The deeper he went, the more disturbing the picture became. The trust controlled assets worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Yet ownership would not pass directly to Ethan. Instead, everything hinged on one condition. Benjamin looked up slowly. The child. Daniel nodded. The first legitimate heir. Silence filled the office. Suddenly, dozens of unexplained decisions began making sense. The timing, the secrecy, the pressure surrounding Audrey's pregnancy. Benjamin felt a chill despite the warm room. Does Ethan know? Daniel hesitated. That is the question I cannot answer. Meanwhile, Ethan sat alone in the executive conference room on the 42nd floor of Caldwell Holdings. His attention should have been on quarterly projections displayed across 3 giant screens. Instead, he found himself staring at an unopened message from Vanessa. Their conversations had changed dramatically during the past week. The confidence she once projected now seemed rehearsed. Her reassurances sounded calculated. Her questions sounded investigative. For the first time since meeting her, Ethan wondered whether he had mistaken charm for loyalty. His assistant entered quietly. "Sir, there is someone here requesting a meeting." Ethan rubbed his temples. "Who?" They would not say. "Then send them away." The assistant hesitated. "They brought documents." Ethan looked up. "What kind of documents?" The assistant swallowed nervously. "Documents connected to the Caldwell family trust." Ethan froze. Hundreds of miles of carefully constructed plans suddenly felt unstable. Somewhere beyond his office walls, pieces were moving across a board he could no longer fully see. And for the first time, he was beginning to suspect he was not the player. He was the target. The man waiting outside Ethan Caldwell's office did not look like a threat. He appeared to be in his late 60s, dressed in an ordinary gray suit, carrying a worn leather briefcase that had probably seen more courtrooms than boardrooms. Yet the moment Ethan entered the conference room and saw him standing beside the window, something felt wrong. "Who are you?" Ethan asked. The man smiled politely. "My name is Harold Bennett. I represented your grandfather for nearly 20 years. Ethan stopped walking. He knew the name immediately. Harold Bennett had helped build the legal structure behind the Caldwell family fortune. "I was told you brought documents." Harold nodded and opened the briefcase. "I brought clarification." He placed several folders on the table. Ethan sat slowly. The room suddenly felt smaller. Harold pushed the first document forward. "Before he passed away, your grandfather made several revisions to the family trust." Ethan frowned. "I know that." "No," Harold replied calmly. You know what people allowed you to know. The words landed harder than Ethan expected. He opened the file. Page after page revealed provisions he had never seen before. Conditions, safeguards, restrictions, layers upon layers of protection designed to prevent misuse of the family's assets. Then he reached the section that changed everything. Ethan read it twice before speaking. This cannot be right. Harold folded his hands. It is exactly right. Ethan looked up. The controlling interest transfers to my child? Correct. Not to me. Not entirely. Ethan felt the blood drain from his face. For years he had assumed the trust secured his future. Instead, he was little more than a temporary steward. The true beneficiary had always been the next generation. Meanwhile, Audrey sat inside a small attorney's office recommended by Martha Green. The lawyer, Patricia Reynolds, reviewed the anonymous documents Audrey had received. She adjusted her glasses several times while reading. Finally, she looked up. Where did these come from? Audrey shook her head. I do not know. Patricia studied her carefully. Someone wants you informed. Or manipulated. Possibly. Patricia leaned back in her chair. But these appear authentic. Audrey looked down at her hands. Her wedding ring was gone now. She had removed it that morning and placed it inside her purse. The pale mark on her finger remained. A ghost of a life she no longer recognized. What happens if the documents are real? She asked quietly. Patricia hesitated. Then your child may be connected to far more than anyone realizes. Across town, Benjamin received another call from Daniel Mercer. This time the investigators sounded unusually serious. I found the source of the anonymous emails. Benjamin straightened immediately. Who? That is the strange part. Daniel paused. They are not coming from a single person. Benjamin frowned. Explain. Different locations. Different devices. Different networks. Silence filled the line. Multiple people? Benjamin asked. That is my conclusion. Daniel lowered his voice. Someone inside Caldwell Holdings is leaking information. Possibly several people. Benjamin stared out his office window. The city stretched endlessly beneath the afternoon sun. What had begun as a family crisis was becoming something much larger. Too many people knew secrets. Too many people were moving pieces across the board. At the same moment, Vanessa Brooks entered her luxury apartment and discovered an envelope resting on the kitchen counter. No stamp, no address, no indication of who had delivered it. Her confidence vanished instantly. Inside was a single photograph. Nothing more. Vanessa stared at the image. The color disappeared from her face. Because the photograph showed a meeting she had spent years making sure nobody ever discovered. And written across the back in black ink were 6 words she could not stop reading. We know who you really are. Vanessa Brooks had spent years controlling every room she entered. She knew how to read people, how to predict reactions, how to stay 3 moves ahead. Yet as she stood alone in her apartment staring at the photograph, she felt something she had not experienced in a very long time. Uncertainty. The image had been taken 7 years earlier outside a private investment conference in Miami. Vanessa had believed that meeting disappeared the moment it ended. She had made certain of it. Yet somehow someone had found proof. Worse, someone wanted her to know they had found it. Her phone rang. Ethan. She answered immediately. What happened? He asked. Vanessa walked toward the window overlooking the city. Why do you assume something happened? Because you never answer my calls this fast. For a moment she almost smiled. Ethan was finally paying attention. Unfortunately for him, it was far too late. We need to meet, she said. Now. 1 hour later, they sat inside a private dining room at an exclusive club where conversations were protected by reputation and expensive membership fees. Ethan placed the trust documents on the table. Vanessa glanced at them without touching a page. You knew, Ethan said quietly. Knew what? That everything depended on the baby. Vanessa looked directly into his eyes. If I knew that, why would I stay? Ethan had no answer. Because that was the problem. Nothing made sense anymore. The story he had believed for years was falling apart piece by piece. Across town, Audrey left Patricia Reynolds' office carrying a folder filled with copies of trust documents and legal notes. The afternoon air felt unusually warm. She walked slowly toward her car, one hand resting on her stomach. The baby shifted gently. For the first time in weeks, the movement made her smile. Not because her problems were solved. Because she finally understood something important. Her child represented more than an inheritance, more than money, more than a family name. The child represented a future that no one else controlled. Her phone buzzed. Another anonymous message. Audrey almost ignored it. Almost. Then she opened it. This message contained only an address and a time. No explanation. No signature. Tonight. 7 o'clock. Audrey frowned. The location belonged to a small church on the edge of town. Why would anyone send her there? Meanwhile, Benjamin Sinclair sat inside his office reviewing security reports Daniel Mercer had obtained from Caldwell Holdings. The investigator entered carrying yet another file. Benjamin raised an eyebrow. More? Daniel nodded. You are not going to believe this. He opened the folder. Inside were records showing dozens of confidential company files had been accessed over the past year. But not by Vanessa. Not by Ethan. Benjamin studied the names carefully. Who is this? Daniel pointed to one employee. Rachel Monroe. Executive assistant. Benjamin frowned. What about her? Daniel leaned forward. She resigned yesterday. Silence filled the room. Benjamin looked back at the reports. Rachel Monroe had accessed trust records, financial transfers, internal communications, and board correspondence. She had touched nearly every secret connected to the company. Then she vanished. Daniel folded his arms. I think she is the source. The anonymous emails? At least some of them. Benjamin stared at the evidence. The picture was finally becoming clearer. Yet every answer seemed to create a larger question. As evening approached, Audrey parked outside the small church and stepped from her car. The parking lot was empty. The stained glass windows reflected the setting sun. For several seconds, she wondered if she had made a mistake. Then the front door opened. A woman stepped outside. Audrey froze. She recognized her instantly. Rachel Monroe, the missing executive assistant. And judging by the expression on Rachel's face, she had been waiting a very long time to tell the truth. Rachel Monroe looked nothing like the polished executive assistant Audrey remembered from Caldwell Holdings. Gone were the tailored suits and carefully managed confidence. Standing beneath the church entrance, she looked exhausted. Not frightened. Relieved. As though carrying a secret for too long had finally become heavier than the consequences of telling it. Thank you for coming, Rachel said quietly. Audrey folded her arms. You have been sending the emails. Rachel nodded. Some of them. Why? Rachel glanced toward the empty parking lot before answering. Because what happened to you should never have happened. The words caught Audrey off guard. She had expected manipulation. She had expected another lie. She had not expected sincerity. Inside the church, sunlight filtered through stained glass and painted soft colors across the wooden pews. Rachel led Audrey to a small meeting room near the back. A thick envelope rested on the table. Audrey immediately noticed the Caldwell Holdings logo printed across several documents visible inside. Rachel took a slow breath. Before you open that, you need to understand something. Audrey remained standing. Then explain it. Rachel nodded. Ethan was never the only person being manipulated. Silence settled between them. Rachel slid the envelope forward. Vanessa spent years building relationships with people connected to wealth. Executives. Investors. Heirs. She studied them. Learned their weaknesses. Learned what they wanted to hear. Audrey stared at her. You are saying none of this was accidental. Nothing about Vanessa is accidental. Rachel's voice remained calm. But there is something even worse. Audrey opened the envelope. Her eyes moved across financial reports, internal communications, and travel records. Then she stopped. One name appeared repeatedly beside confidential trust discussions. Vanessa Brooks. Her stomach tightened. She knew. Rachel nodded. Long before Ethan did. Across town, Ethan sat alone in his office long after most employees had gone home. The city lights stretched beyond the glass walls like distant stars. The trust documents remained spread across his desk. For the first time in years, he was reviewing his own life the way an outsider might. Every conversation, every decision, every warning he ignored. His phone buzzed. A message from Vanessa. We need to talk immediately. Ethan stared at the screen. Then another message arrived. Do not trust anyone. For some reason, that sentence made him laugh. A short, bitter laugh. Trust was exactly what had brought him here. Meanwhile, Benjamin Sinclair arrived at Daniel Mercer's office, carrying a copy of the latest reports. Daniel was already waiting. You were right, Benjamin said. Daniel looked surprised. About which part? This was never only about money. Daniel nodded slowly. It is about control. Benjamin placed the documents on the desk. And now people are losing control. Daniel opened a file. There is one final piece. Benjamin looked down. Inside was a collection of board communications scheduled for release the following morning. Emergency meetings, audit requests, compliance reviews, independent investigations. The walls were closing in around Caldwell Holdings. Not because of one scandal, because too many secrets had been hidden for too long. Back inside the church, Audrey reached the final page in Rachel's envelope. Her breath caught. It was a transcript of a private conversation recorded nearly 6 months earlier. She recognized Ethan's voice immediately, but the words that followed left her stunned. Ethan was arguing, defending her, refusing a proposal involving the trust, refusing to alter documents, refusing to remove protections connected to their unborn child. Audrey looked up slowly. He said no. Rachel's eyes filled with something close to regret. More than once, Audrey stared at the pages. The picture she had built in her mind suddenly fractured. Because for the first time since that stormy night, she was forced to consider a possibility she never expected. What if Ethan Caldwell was guilty of many things, but not the worst thing everyone believed? 3 weeks later, the largest boardroom at Caldwell Holdings was filled beyond capacity. Attorneys lined one side of the room. Auditors occupied the other. Senior executives sat in uneasy silence. Nobody touched the catered breakfast. Nobody checked their phones. The atmosphere felt less like a corporate meeting and more like the final chapter of a story everyone suddenly realized they were part of. Ethan Caldwell stood near the windows overlooking the city. He looked older than he had a month earlier. Not because of time, because of truth. Truth had a way of aging people when it arrived all at once. Across the room, Vanessa Brooks maintained her usual composure. Her posture remained perfect. Her expression remained calm. But confidence and control were no longer the same thing. At precisely 9 o'clock, the meeting began. Independent investigators presented months of findings. Financial irregularities, undisclosed communications, manipulated reports, hidden relationships. Every carefully concealed secret was now projected on screens large enough for everyone to see. Nobody raised their voice. Nobody needed to. Facts were doing all the talking. As the presentation continued, a pattern emerged. The evidence pointed toward years of calculated influence by Vanessa. Private conversations, strategic introductions, carefully timed recommendations. None of it illegal by itself. Yet together it painted a picture that could no longer be ignored. When the final slide appeared, silence settled across the room. Vanessa slowly stood. For a moment, everyone expected a denial, an explanation, a defense. Instead, she simply collected her purse. "I suppose this is where I leave," she said quietly. No one stopped her. No one followed. The door closed behind her, and just like that, the woman who had spent years controlling narratives became a footnote in someone else's story. Later that afternoon, Ethan sat alone in a conference room staring at the empty chair across from him. The company would survive. The trust would survive. The family fortune would survive. Yet victory felt strangely absent. His phone rested on the table. For several minutes, he stared at a number he had not called since the storm. Finally, he pressed dial. Audrey answered after the third ring. Neither spoke immediately. The silence carried weeks of pain, misunderstandings, and unfinished conversations. "I was wrong," Ethan said at last. Audrey closed her eyes. She had imagined this moment many times. None of those versions sounded like this. "About what?" she asked quietly. Ethan looked out the window. "About what mattered." Another silence followed. Then Audrey heard something she never expected. Not excuses. Not blame. Regret. Genuine regret. 2 days later, Benjamin Sinclair stood inside a hospital room, holding his granddaughter for the first time. The afternoon sunlight spilled through the windows, casting a golden glow across the room. Audrey sat comfortably in bed, exhausted but smiling. The baby slept peacefully in her arms before Benjamin gently lifted her. For several seconds, the former federal judge simply stared at the tiny face. Every investigation, every document, every sleepless night suddenly felt insignificant compared to this moment. Near the doorway, Ethan stood quietly. He did not move closer. He did not ask for attention. He simply watched. Benjamin noticed him first. Their eyes met across the room. Months earlier, Benjamin would have looked away in anger. Today he only nodded once. A small gesture. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But perhaps the beginning of something. Audrey looked toward the window where the evening sky was beginning to fade into shades of orange and blue. The The storm that changed everything felt very far away now. Yet she understood something she had not understood before. Losing the life she thought she wanted had led her to the life she actually deserved. And as Benjamin rocked his granddaughter gently in his arms while the city lights slowly awakened outside, one truth became impossible to ignore. Money could build houses. Power could open doors. Influence could shape reputations. But in the end, the things that mattered most could never be bought back once they were thrown away.